My story is not humorous. I will say that my story um, revolves around a tragedy, but I think that you will see hope and faith and love in this story as it unfolds. Um, the story happens on Sunday, October the 2nd in 2005. I had been at Adirondack Friends meeting in South Glens Falls just over 18 months as their pastoral minister. And we were just finishing up our community's crop walk, which was one of several activities or organizations that I had affiliated with within the community, because for me, that's an important place of ministry as a pastor. And so I had been assigned the job of running the poop out van, which was the van that went along the trail or the circuit that people were walking and picked up people who had given up or who were lagging. And at about 4 o'clock, I got a phone call on my cell phone, and I answered it, and I said, "Hello, poop out van." And the person on the other line said, after a little bit of silence, "Regina, this is Jeff Palmer from the hospital, and we have received a mass casualty report, and I'd like for you to come in and help us administer services and support in the emergency room if you can." And so I said, all right, because as a volunteer chaplain, which was another one of the places in the community that I was serving, I was particularly well suited to get to the hospital quickly because I lived almost within sight of the hospital in Glens Falls. So I went into the hospital and learned that there had been a boating accident up on Lake George, which is about 10 miles to the north of Glens Falls. And there were a number of us who were there waiting for the victims to come into the hospital. And we were really upset and worried about what we might encounter. We did learn that what had happened was that a tour boat had overturned in the middle of the lake that had been carrying 47 people. We knew there were some fatalities. We didn't know how many, and we didn't have any idea about the extent of injuries of people that were coming in. But after about a half-hour wait, people started to arrive, and we all got really, really busy. And I met a man who I'll call Fritz, and learned that the people on the tour boat were primarily elderly folks who were on a leaf peeper tour to see fall leaves in the Adirondacks. And Fritz was from Michigan, and he and his wife had come on the trip, and we're looking forward to a good time. And they were on the boat when it flipped, and Fritz held his wife until he couldn't anymore, and she drowned. And he told me that, and we talked it through. And over the next 5 hours or so I spent with Fritz, I learned a lot about him and his wife and their life. And he told me stories of their daughter who had passed away as a young person. We made phone calls to his other children, and he never got anybody on the actual line, but he did leave messages that said, "Your mother has died," which I learned in that experience that you never let somebody make their own phone calls when they're notifying next of kin. Or that you practice the phone call message with them before they make those phone calls. But Fritz was a remarkable guy. He and his wife had been married over 50 years, and they had had a really good life. And he was a Roman Catholic, and we talked about their faith as a couple and the faith that he continued to have. And he articulated that his faith was still an important part about how he would get through the next period of time, as he dealt with the death of his wife, the drowning death of his wife. We sat and waited, and I kept wondering what we were waiting for. And about 2 hours after we had been put together, the doors opened, and every law enforcement officer in the county came in to take depositions from all the victims. And so I sat with Fritz while he gave his deposition, his account of what had happened. And there I learned that, there were quite a number of people who didn't make it. After depositions were taken, the full-time chaplain at the hospital, Jeff, made an announcement that there had been 19 people that had died in that accident, and it remains one of the most significant boating accidents in the United States to this day. We then Fritz and I were taken to another room, and a couple of people came in, and they were the people who had been on the boat that picked Fritz and his wife up. And it turned out that this man and his wife were neighbors of mine. They actually worked across the street from where the meeting was in South Glens Falls. And they had 4 kids, and they were out as a family on this beautiful Sunday afternoon on the lake. And they were close by when the Ethan Allen, which was the name of the tour boat, went over. And they picked Fritz and his wife up, and their 13-year-old daughter gave CPR to Fritz's wife. And unfortunately, it wasn't effective. Fritz and I parted ways when I walked him out to the tour bus, and he and all the other survivors got on the bus and went to the hotel where they were going to spend the night. And that is the one place where Fritz kind of freaked out, because he knew it wasn't the same bus he had come in on, and was afraid that he was going to lose all this stuff that had been on the first bus. And I was able to talk him down a little bit. And I promised him that I would try and get to him the next day and make a connection. But that never happened. And I think through this, I've learned that chaplaincy calls are often short-term and very limited. And once you leave that person, it's likely that you'll never see them again. I had by the time I arrived home that evening, it was about 10 o'clock or a little after. And when I walked in my door, my son and my husband were both there, and we all kind of looked at each other. And my son, Andy, said, "Mom," he said, "I think this is why we got sent to South Glens Falls. So you could be there tonight at the hospital and help take care of these people." And that helped me a lot to begin to make some sense in a faithful way about what had happened. Adirondack Meeting is placed in front of a funeral home that's on the street behind it. And my neighbor, who was the funeral director that served there, had also gone up to Lake George and done a lot of the transferals of the bodies to the hospital. They had to bring in a refrigerator truck because the morgue at the hospital didn't have enough room for 19 bodies. And she was cleaning out her car the next morning, and we kind of talked ourselves through what had happened. And it was then that I realized that the smell of diesel fuel was going to trigger me every time I smelled it for the rest of my life, because the fuel in the boat that went over was diesel. And of course it went into the lake, and everybody that was in the water got covered with water that was had diesel fuel in it. And that continues to this day. The first thing I think when I smell diesel is about October the 2nd, 2005, and the Ethan Allen going over. I continue to be blessed by the memories that I had with Fritz. His son wrote a letter to the editor of the local paper and thanked me and some other people by name that had helped with his dad during this traumatic event. I've also been able to talk to people who have been involved in different ways in that accident over the years. And I also got closure in February when the community did a memorial in the arena, the Civic Center, and we were able to grieve as a community for the loss of these 19 people. And so I think I continue to be grateful for service like this, even though it sure does take a toll. It's also quite a way of encountering the divine and sharing and showing love to people that you don't know in some experiences that bind us as humans together. And I will always be grateful as well as horrified by my experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Regina, for sharing that tender story with us and allowing all of us to hold it with you.